more content each day to get us to where we need to be.
So what I'm hearing is more notes.
Look, my goal is for you to burn through at least 2 notebooks by the end of the year.
Really?
So everyone, right now, tear out 10 pieces of paper and throw them away. That was a joke. Okay, so just understand that yes, the Somerset school year is affected and the school year becomes shorter, but the U of M grins and says that's nice. Now cover everything anyway. So I have to cover we have to cover everything as if you're on campus.
So what you're saying is like this is the worst year to be a CIS student.
No, it's the best year to be a CIS student.
Yeah, more notes.
Yes, you get to learn more. Okay. This is the original Constitution. This was the original document that allowed the U.S. to hit the ground running. Once the U.S. declared independence and won independence, we had a game plan. This is how we're going to roll. So the Articles of Confederation, which I'm showing you, had a structure. What does that mean? It was a confederation. We learned it yesterday. What's a confederation as opposed to a federation, as opposed to a unitary system? You've claimed you've taken civics, so you should know those 3 terms. A federation, a confederation, and a unitary system. Go ahead. What's confederation?
Isn't it like a group that came together, like they're acting as one, but they're like a bunch of different stuff, kind of like a bunch of states?
Very good. Exactly. 13 independent entities that sort of join together. Later on in this class, we're going to study NATO. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Hey, what am I doing? Synthesizer. Very good. What's NATO? Does anyone know? What's NATO? NATO. I'm talking to 35 juniors who do not know what NATO is.
Isn't it kind of like the UN?
Good God. The UN is another example of a confederation.
Yeah.
NATO is the military alliance formed by the U.S. after World War II to prevent World War II like situations, right? And including Germany into the fold so that they're one of us and as a result cannot be the enemy. That's a very effective thing to do, right? You take your enemy and you say, now you're one of us. Don't you build up your military. We got it. We'll build up our military and protect. Come on, Germany. Calm down, Germany. Let's go over here, Germany. That's the idea behind NATO. NATO is a confederation. Its members include the US and Canada, and Britain and France and Germany. Each of them is an independent country, but they're part of a greater whole. United Nations, right? In the United Nations, we get 1 vote. China gets 1 vote, right? China is 3 times our population, but they get 1 vote. And it's like everyone, I don't think anyone says, well, China should have 3 votes. Because the 3 times, they're 1 nation. We're 1 nation. And if that makes sense to you, then this should make sense to you. Virginia is a very large state. Rhode Island is a very tiny state, but they're both states. They both get 1 vote. In this original plan called the Articles of Confederation, that's what that means. There was no president. I mean, when were we born as a nation? What year? Does anyone know? That's when we said we were an independent nation. But when did we actually get... That's going the wrong way. 1783, when the Treaty of Paris was signed. The first president, Georgie Porgy, he wasn't elected until 1789. So from 1783 until 1789, U.S. was a thing but did not have a president. That's because this was the document that was the governing document for the United States, the Articles of Confederation. There was no president. There was no Supreme Court. All there was Congress, where each state got 1 vote. There were 13 people in Congress. Each of you gets a vote. Okay? And it was unicameral. Anyone know what that means? I'll give you a clue. Today, we have a bicameral legislature. 1 house, that's right. A 1 house. Today we have 2 houses. The reason we have 2 houses is because back then they had 1 house and they decided this isn't working. The reason we have a president today is because they didn't back then and they said this isn't working. The reason we have a Supreme Court today is because they didn't back then and they said this isn't working. The reason we drive on the right today is because the British drove on the left. We are a very reactionary nation. Okay. Any questions so far? Let's keep going. This is what the powers were of the U.S. government. It had the power to declare war. It had the power to raise an army. It had the power to raise a navy. It had the power to sign treaties with foreign nations. It had the power to have ambassadors. What's an ambassador? When I say the U.S. ambassador to Russia, what am I talking about? It's your day.
It's like you send someone over there and they're like, hey, I'm from America. I'm coming to see what's up because you're way over here. We didn't know what's going on.
Okay, very good. It's the official representative of the United States to whatever country, right? So the American ambassador to Russia is the American representative. He lives in Moscow or she lives in Moscow. The U.S. could borrow money, which is a huge power. Remember, on the day the U.S. was born, heavily in debt. Well, the way you get out of that is you borrow it and then you pay those people. But now you're in debt even more, but you can figure that out. Post offices. I know this is weird to think, but the post office was extremely important at that time. Think about it. It's the only way to communicate long distance back then. It's information. Imagine if there was a government agency that controlled your phones, your tweets, your texts, your email. Every way that you communicate was under the control of one office. And they called it the post office. That's what this was. It was the government agency that controlled the exchange of information, other than face-to-face. Okay, pretty powerful. And then if New York had an argument with New Jersey, where would they go to settle the argument? They would go to the referee, the U.S. government. The U.S. government was the referee if two states argued. And boy, did they argue. At the time, they argued a lot. Questions so far? A lot of notes on this slide. I apologize. Here's the problem. I have for you a list of weaknesses, problems with the original U.S. government. Where does it say they can tax? It doesn't. The U.S. government had no authority to tax. Now, many of you might be thinking, good. But if you can't tax, it's difficult to raise revenue. Right? The British taxed. Eventually, the U.S. taxed. But not yet. Not yet. Where does it say up here that the U.S. could regulate trade, deny trade to Britain or France? Say, hey, Britain or France, you're behaving badly, and so as a result, we're not going to trade with you. It doesn't. Each state had that power. Does anyone know what's going on in Syria right now? Like right now, the U.S. has made a sort of a momentous decision about a week ago.
Didn't we leave it?
Yes. The U.S., the Trump administration announced we're out of Syria. Syria is right there, right there. And in Syria, did you not see?
Oh, why were we there?
Why are we there? That's a great question. Get into world of conflict and learn. But the short answer is American forces are there to prevent Syria from fighting another group of people called the Kurds. We are allies with Syria. Not Syria. God dang it. We're allies with Turkey. I'm okay. This green country right there, that's Turkey. Turkey is an American ally. We're friends with the Turks. But we are also friends with another group of people called the Kurds, and they don't like each other. They've been going to war against each other for hundreds of years, and what we were doing until a week ago was standing between them. You're over there, you're over there. Now they can't attack each other, because they both like Americans, right? They're like your mom when you and your brother are fighting. There. And we just stepped out of the way. And now you know what's going on? Now they're fighting each other.
Why?
Now they're going to war.
Why do we leave?
Well, that's a good question. One thing Trump promised, as if elected, he said we're going to get out of these entangling wars. We're going to get out. And so in his mind, he checked that box. Right? Now, maybe a lot of Americans are like, good. Why are we everywhere? Why are there American soldiers? By the way, one of the bigwigs in Syria, one of the American bigwigs graduated from this school. I taught him. He has a beard out to here right now. He is a bad mofo. He is one of the commanders on the ground. He's a tough nut. And I can't say his name. I learned that. I used to say his name is, and I was told, do not say his name because it goes on to here, which is now on the internet. And there are people that look at the internet and they say, oh, that's his name. I wonder where his oh, and suddenly a terrorist strike against this guy's family. So I can't say his name. But he's there. Well, he was there. Anyway, the reason I'm pointing this out is because one of the things that the Trump administration has said to Turkey is, hey, Turkey, stop attacking the Kurds, because if you don't, we'll stop trading with you. Which this does not give the U.S. government the authority to do at the time. The reason the Trump administration has the ability to do that now is because this didn't, and it was replaced with a new constitution. That's another weapon in the president's arsenal. He can threaten to cut off trade. This did not allow that. Okay, let's keep going. There's no court system. There's no Supreme Court system. Right? If you're arrested for how many of you read your document that you were supposed to read for today? Why isn't everyone's hand up? Remember the little arrangement that we had? I will only assign you one of the documents, but in exchange, you'll actually do it? Remember the little arrangement? Anyway, those of you who read about the Sedition Act, you of course read that. It was a law that outlawed criticizing the president. It outlawed criticizing the president. Well, couldn't you say, hey, that violates my rights? Right? And under this form of government, to whom would you go to make that complaint? There's no court. There's no federal court system. Now, that doesn't mean states didn't have their own courts. They did. But there's no federal court system. So it's a bit of a problem. And then if you wanted to amend anything, you needed 9 out of 13. There are 13 states. Each state gets one vote. What's a majority of 13? 7. Oh, math. 7 is a majority of 13. But this says, you need 9. And you might think, well, so what? But think about it. That means if 8 states say, yeah, and let's see, 13 minus 8 is 5. If 5 states say no, if 8 states say yeah, and 5 states say no, the answer is no. 5 states get their will over 8 states. That makes getting anything done kind of difficult, but that's what this said. And then finally, any amendment to the Articles of Confederation, all 13 states had to say yeah. You could have 12 states saying yeah, and 1 state saying, nah, I don't think so. And the answer is no. Right? It makes the federal government sort of powerless. It can't really do anything because of these weaknesses. Okay? Questions there? Let's keep going. 2 laws that I'm going to introduce to you that dictated much of what you and I have right here. Remember, the western border of the United States was the Mississippi River. And remember that what Congress did was they said, look, any new states are totally equal. So let's meet 2 laws. The first law is this law. It's the Land Ordinance Law of 1785. So you're just writing this. I mean, I hope you're not drawing this map. Good God, what the heck are you doing? Just write the name of this law, and then let's look at this map. There's the name of the law. Now let's look at this map. What it did was this law organized territories, non-states, organized them. So you can see the names of the various areas that eventually will come: Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota and Iowa and Illinois. Okay, and it said, all right, you're some poor schlup in Philadelphia. You want to move out here? Awesome. It will be organized in this way. I will explain this in a bit. Okay, So the whole area will be organized in a grid-like fashion. It will be organized and properties will be organized. You want to buy one of those properties? Awesome. Just write a check to the federal government. Right? I don't think they had checks. You're going to pay the federal government. What's the federal government going to do with that money? Pay off that huge debt that the U.S. was in because of the Revolutionary War. Right? So land was sold and the money would be used to pay off the debt. And here's something kind of interesting. If you own slaves, go ahead. Move there. There was no ban on slavery. Has anyone ever heard of a guy by the name of Dred Scott? Dred Scott. Do you know where Dred Scott lived? Here. Right here in the St. Croix River Valley. He lived here. He would have a rather large role later on in American history. You never heard of Dred Scott? You never heard of NATO, and you've never heard of, who was your history teacher in middle school? Anyway, so go ahead and move here. This is the plan that said, how would it be organized? So you can see it's a 6x6 grid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So each of these is about, let's just say it's a mile. I don't know that, but so it's a 6 mile by 6 mile grid. And what I'm about to tell you, I'm not going to be holding you accountable to know that 4 of those pieces will be this, and then one of them will be this. Who cares? Okay, but it is sort of interesting. So a 6 mile by 6 mile grid organized this whole area. 4 of them would be given to the U.S. government. 4 of every 36 1 mile by 1 mile grids would be given to the U.S. government to use it at their will. Maybe for a national park, maybe for a federal office, whatever. And then 1 would be for education. Education. They didn't do this in Europe. Who cares if Europeans know how to read and write? Shovel. Remember shovel? But here we need an educated citizenry. Okay? This law was replaced 2 years later by this law. It's very similar with 2 major differences. The Land Ordinance Law of 1787 says, okay, how do we get you to become a state? What hoops do you have to jump through to become a state? Okay. Anyone happen to know how many people, at least in the territory, do you need before you can apply for statehood? How many people have to move into an area before you say, all right, we've got enough? Nobody knows. Okay, that's right. 60,000. Once you have 60,000 people in a certain area, you can apply for statehood. And now, here's this interesting one. No slavery. These states would not allow for slavery. Okay. Any questions there? Go ahead.
Why is Puerto Rico not a state yet?
Yep. So Puerto Rico was acquired after the Spanish-American War. And so it became part of an American empire. And the people of Puerto Rico said, well, we don't want to be part of an American empire. We'd rather be an independent country. And the U.S., since 1898, has had this relationship with Puerto Rico. It's unique, where it's not a state, but it's not an independent country either. And basically, the United States policy toward Puerto Rico is, look, hey, Puerto Ricans, do you want to become a state? Welcome, 51st state. Do you not want to become a state? Do you want to become an independent country? Great. See you later. Or do you sort of like things the way they are now, where you're neither? And that's what they've chosen so far. Puerto Rico does not have to spend a dime on its military defense, but they have their own Olympic team. Not another state in the nation has their own Olympic team. You know what would be probably good at their own Olympic team is California. Like something like half of every Olympic team the U.S. has is people from California. But they're part of the United States, so they don't get their own Olympic team, but Puerto Rico does. And about 8 years ago, the Puerto Rican basketball team beat the U.S. basketball team in an Olympic qualifier, which is crazy, right? But so the answer is because they don't want to yet. Go ahead.
But like Washington, D.C.
Oh, we're going to talk about Washington, D.C. Yeah, it's not a state either. Okay. All right, let's keep going here. So the next 2 slides identify, all right, we're an independent nation. How's it going with our old rival, Britain, our dad, or mom, I guess. How's it going? We've moved out of the house. We're our own person. We have our own house. How's it going, that relationship with mom and dad? Britain, how's it going? So you're looking at this thing. This is the triangle trade. And I told you yesterday, there's this international trade network the United States is part of. But here's the problem. The British weren't cooperating. Remember the Navigation Acts? Navigation Act said that the United States had to sell things to Britain first. They never repealed them. They were still the law of the land in Britain. In other words, Britain was continuing to treat the United States as their colonies. And we kept saying to Britain, hey, we're an independent nation. Stop boarding our ships. Stopping our boats from going to other nations. Stop it. And the British were like, gee. Right? They were ignoring our requests. They were goading us. Oh, did our Navy board one of your ships again? Well, maybe we should go to war again. Want to go to war? Huh? They were goading us. Come on. Oh, we boarded another ship. This would lead to the War of 1812, right? So you can see that, I mean, right as soon as we became an independent nation, the British were just taunting us. Let's try this again. Let's try this whole war thing again. And okay, so they never repealed the Navigation Acts. A couple other problems. So over here is the area called Vermont. The British said, Vermont, that's part of Canada, it's ours. So they invaded. The British military invaded. Oh, did we just invade your country? You can't let that happen. So what are we going to do? We're going to go to war again? Well, eventually the answer is yeah, but at the time we didn't. There were all these forts. Remember all these forts out here? Remember those were the forts that Pontiac had attacked? Those forts, they're still there. And you know who's in them? British soldiers. Get out of our country, said the Americans, right? Get out. We will leave those forts. And you know what the British said? Yeah, we'll leave. Oh, we haven't left yet. Oh no. We're still there. Aren't you mad? Aren't you very angry with us? Could the U.S., last note, could the U.S. punish Britain by not trading with them? Nope, because Congress didn't have that authority. I just showed you that on the previous slide. Congress could not cut off trade with Britain. Now, each state could independently, but the nation itself couldn't. So there was no weapon in the American arsenal other than war. That was the only thing the U.S. could do in response to Britain under the rules of the original Constitution. And that seemed like an extreme solution. Ready? Last slide. Well, what about a couple other nations? Looking at problems with Spain, problems with France, and then problems with this thing called the Barbary States, whatever that is. Okay. Let's look at this map here. This identifies the problem with Spain. So the area in white, that's the United States. This grayish, that's Spain, which includes this thing called Florida. Florida was Spanish at the time. And you'll notice that at the end of the Mississippi River, the Spanish have complete control of the Mississippi River. Anyone see a problem? Yeah.
They use the Mississippi to like get into the Gulf of Mexico, go places, but the Spanish had it.
Very good, right? Let's say you're a farmer and you're raising, I don't know, tobacco, right here in the Wisconsin territory. And the way you want to get it to New York is by putting on a boat. Well, it's fine, no problem, right? You're in American territory. Suddenly, you're in Spanish territory, and they get to dictate if you can go through or not. How many of you have this thing called a garage? You have a garage, okay? And in the garage, you have these things called cars, yes? Okay, can you imagine if your neighbor had the garage door opener? He controlled the opening and the closing of the garage. It's your garage, and it's your car, but it's his garage door opener. And let's just say you can't manually lift it, which I do every day. Let's say that the only way to open the garage door is the garage door opener. So every day you have to knock on his door and say, can you open the garage door? I gotta go. And he said, okay. And then you come home after school. Can you open the garage door? I'm here. I'm home. Okay. That's what the Spanish are. They control the garage door opener. Oh, you want to go through? Okay. Or no, you can't. The Spanish control the end of the Mississippi River, and that's a problem. Spain controlled the mouth of the Mississippi, which they closed off to the United States in 1784. Well, that's a problem. You've just killed river commerce by closing off the end. So we're not getting along well with Britain, and we're not getting along well with Spain. They, for whatever reason, closed off the end of the Mississippi River. One other thing to note here, this little shaded area, the Spanish said that was Florida, and we said, no, that's Alabama. And so there was a dispute, who gets the shaded area when. Okay. All right, well, what about France? How are we doing with them? Well, we borrowed huge amounts of money from France, and they wanted it back. They wanted the money back. Okay. By the way, this would lead to the French Revolution. This would lead to King Louis losing his head. Right? The French were heavily in debt because we didn't pay them back. And in order to get us to pay them back, they said, you can no longer trade with the French West Indies. Ha, 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 ha. Right? They cut off trade. So we're not getting along well with the French either. We have enemies with the British. We are enemies with the Spanish. Our French friends are mad at us. And then to make it even worse, there's this thing called the Barbary States, whatever the crap that is. This is the Barbary States. It's the northern coast of Africa. Okay? At this time, they were called the Barbary States. Today, it's Algeria and Libya and parts of Egypt. But back then, it was called the Barbary States. The Barbary States had a navy that controlled the Mediterranean. All these European countries could have gone to war against the Barbary States, but all they did was say, and they paid them a yearly tribute. Here's some money, let's not go to war. And all these European countries concluded that it was cheaper to just pay the Barbary States rather than go to war with them. Okay, we're not going to go to war. But now the U.S. is engaged in trade, right? We're part of that global trade network. And so now the Barbary States says, hey, the United States, you either pay us or our Navy's going to attack your vessels engaged in trade. Okay, and the U.S. paid them until we decided, no, we're not going to pay them. Okay, so the British paid this ransom, the French paid it, the Spanish paid it, and now the U.S. is paying them. Problem is we don't have the money. We don't have the money. So that's going to be a problem. So look at all these problems that the U.S. is having from its inception. Everyone hates us. The end. You can put Zatabe when you're ready. Just a reminder, this class ends at 9:41, so we have about 20 minutes. Okay. Now, I know you're under the impression that what we're about to do is engage in a discussion of your documents, but the poor reaction I got when I asked how many of you actually read yours leads me to conclude that you're not ready for that. So let's retry this for tomorrow. Read your document. Actually read it. Read your document. You need. Okay. Here you go. Read your one document. Your one document. Why is, I don't know. Just pick one. Okay. Anyone else not here? Just pick one of the six. Just a quick little note. For those of you who had document 4, I think, if you had document 4, one of the nice things that this packet has, yeah, document 4. Who had document 4? Easy. The first paragraph of document 4 is not part of document 4. It's a, hey, before you read, you should know paragraph. It's providing context. That's exactly right. Very good. Okay. So again, read your document. What is wrong with me today? I should say, what else is wrong with me today? Oh, yeah. Okay. Actually read your document and figure out the argument being made for or against, in the case of documents 1 and 2, taxes. In the case of documents 3 and 4, the Sedition Act. And in the case of documents 5 and 6, whether or not a state should be able to nullify a federal law. Okay? Yes or no to that topic. Okay? Any questions on that? Let's talk about your Lexington paper. Mr. Lindenberg came in yesterday and said that there was some concern. And so here I am, ready to help you about how to write the Lexington paper. So I'm going to give you this little tool. It's a gift. Ryback, do you want one?
Take 2.
You should be looking at the paragraph arguing which team is better, the Vikings or the Packers. You Packer fans, did you see the meme that's all over from last night's game? Shows the ref doing the Lambeau Leap. Because he was the most valuable player in the game last night. I laughed. Okay. You should be looking at the paragraph called Vikings or Packers. There's also another side here, but we'll worry about that later. Ready? I'm just going to read it, and then I'm going to ask you to sort of think about this. Which team is superior, the Vikings or Packers? Hey, what's that? Hook! It's the question. Now, what I want you to do is mentally transform that into a question that you could write for your Lexington paper. Just look at the first sentence and think about how you could transform it into your first sentence for your Lexington paper. It's pretty easy. Anyone want to throw out a shot? Go ahead.
Who shot first, the colonists or the British?
Perfect. All you have to do is substitute colonists for the word Vikings and the word British for Packers, and then change the first dependent clause there. Who shot first, the colonists or the British? Question mark at Lexington. There, very good. In order to determine the most likely answer, one must look at 3 factors. Say, I'm about to introduce to you in the roadmap 3 factors that indicate who's better between the Vikings and Packers. Now, can you transfer that into what you would do for your Lexington and Concord paper? You don't have to answer that yet, but the answer is, yes, you can. Okay, just will you do this favor for me? Just flip over to the quick delete to the other side. You see that left-hand column? Look at all those factors that you could use to determine who shot first. On the Viking and Packer paragraph, I say that there are 3 factors that you should use to determine which is the better team. What you're going to do is pick 3 of these factors to determine who shot first. Okay, and you're just gonna substitute these for these. All right, let's take a look. It says the first factor is quality of facilities. Now, what's your first factor going to be when determining who shot first? I don't really care. Just pick one. It doesn't matter. Okay, let's keep going. The headquarters, practice locations, and stadiums of these teams goes a long way in determining which team can claim dominance over the other. Okay, there's a slight explanation of why quality of facilities would determine who's the better team. Same thing. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to pick one of these and then in a sentence, just sort of briefly explain, well, why? Why would that matter as to who shot first? Let's keep reading the Viking Packer thing. The second factor is fan support. The number of people who buy team gear, watch games on media, and attend games can help determine the public image of each team. The final factor is team success. Head-to-head games, regular season games, playoff victories, and Super Bowl championships can determine the success of one team versus another. What is all that I've read after the first sentence? What is all that? No. It starts with an R and it rhymes with mode map. Roadmap! It's your roadmap! This is the roadmap! It tells me what you're going to talk about in the rest of your paper. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to spend at least 3 sentences. And what I did here, whoever wrote this paragraph did was actually spend 6 sentences. 1 sentence to introduce it, and then another sentence to sort of explain it. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to spend a sentence on factor number 1. You're going to spend a sentence on factor number 2. You're going to spend a sentence on factor number 3. And then if you want, another sentence after to just sort of explain what it means. Okay? You can do the same thing. Let's keep going. So it says here, it is because of superior facilities, fan support, and on-the-field success that the Green Bay Packers can lay claim to being a superior team over the Minnesota Vikings. What is that? That's your thesis. There it is. Now, all you need to do, for the most part, is substitute your 3 factors for these 3 factors. Substitute British for Packers, substitute colonists for Vikings, and you've got your thesis. Boom. No. Kaboom. My friend Tim, who graduated number 3 in my class. We're good friends. He's a millionaire, and here I am. I'm seeing him Saturday too. Okay, anyway, there. Can you visualize your first paragraph based on this? I mean, if I were you, I would just have this out as I'm typing and then just say, okay, yeah, okay. And then just tweak it a little bit. Okay?
What
Right?
year did you graduate?
What year did I graduate? 1988. Why? Are you saying I'm old?
No.
Are you saying I'm old? I got a mail the other day. I got in the mail an offer to join AARP, which is the retired people thing. But I'm not retired. My daughter, you're old. Okay. So now let's take a look at this bad boy, which is the handout, which sort of explains the whole thing. And just flipping it over. So all the other side of the Viking Packer thing is doing is saying how you should write your first paragraph. Make your hook, introduce your 3 ideas, and then in your roadmap, you can also have an additional sentence that says why that should matter, your 3 factors, and then your compound thesis. You're saying because of this, this, and this, that it can be concluded that the colonists or the British shot first. Do not, as so many of you did in your Blue Book essays, don't do this. It's because of this, that I think the British shot first. You don't need to say I think. If you eliminate those 2 words, it's still what you think. It is unnecessary. It's like one of you raises your hand and say, and I call on you and say, yeah, I was going to say that. I know that because you're about to say it. Why do you do that? You raise your hand. Yeah, I was going to say, I like blue. Now, in another universe, I like blue. Those 2 sentences mean the same thing. And you don't have to say, I was going to say, because you said it. Okay. Now, let's look at this. I'm looking at the back. The writing of the actual rough draft, and as a result, the writing of the paper itself. Okay? We should all understand, all on the same page. By the way, Lindy tells me he's been spending time with you on this, correct? Okay. Look at argument 1, argument 2, and argument 3. Is there anything that you're looking at like you don't know what to do? For each one, you create a topic sentence. The topic sentence should read something like this. Based on bias, it can be concluded that the British shot first. Or it's based on bias that it can be concluded that the Americans shot first. That's how it should read, or something like that. Okay? For all three, it's based on factor X that it be concluded that this group shot first. So far, so good? The next sentence is context. Here's what you're doing for that part. You're saying, why does it matter? Why is bias important? Why is time frame important? Why is the credibility of the specific? Why does it matter? Why should that impact your conclusion? Why does it matter is the question you're answering for context. Why does it matter? Okay. So far, so good. Don't get stuck on that one. I don't expect a home run. I shouldn't be weeping with joy at the beauty of your context sentence. I should be like, oh my God, Shakespeare would be so proud. I'm not worried so much about it. Okay, so far so good. Evidence number 3 is prove it. Prove it. Prove that the British shot first. Prove that the Americans shot first within that factor. If you're arguing about bias, your evidence should be about bias. Don't say, well, it's obvious that bias shows that the British shot first. After all, the American testimony was 60 years later. What the crap does that have to do with bias? Your evidence should be about that factor, okay? And you can quote directly. Notice I said you can. Didn't say you had to, didn't say you didn't have to, but you can. You can quote. You can quote in papers. Don't quote Blue Book essays, but this isn't a Blue Book essay. It's a paper. Go ahead and quote if you want. Okay, so go ahead and quote.
Do you want us to quote?
It's really, I'm comfortable with you quoting or paraphrasing. It's fine. Either way.
I'll make my whole paper up.
Want you to quote and quote weave, I assume. Quote weave? Have you been introduced to quote weaving? Where you sort of blend in the quote part with you sort of weave the quote into the larger sentence? Have you been exposed to that? Okay. If you want to quote weave, awesome. If you don't, great. You don't have to. It sounds like Lindy wants you to quote, so let's quote. After that, you explain what you think it means in your own words. That's the evidence analysis. That's the analysis. Okay. Notice in Roman numeral 5, it says acknowledgement of other side with rebuttal. Okay, so you're going to say, yeah, bias proves that the British shot first. You're going to provide some evidence that says, see, the Americans are totally biased, and this British official wasn't biased, or the other way around. And then after you do that, there's this next part, the last part of each paragraph, where you do this. Now, some would say that it was the British who were biased. However, and then you explain why it's wrong, which you may have done in the analysis previously anyway. I just want to make sure that what you do in each paragraph is say, here's how I answer the argument that, well, actually, it was my side that was biased. And here's where you say, well, yeah, there may have been bias, but less biased than the other side. Prove it. Address the argument that, no, your side was biased, or your side had the uncredible evidence because of oath under duress or whatever. Remember that one British guy that said, well, yeah, we shot first. But remember, he was under the control of the Americans. You could say that. Now, how do you answer that? How do you answer that criticism? You could go to another witness that says, yeah, but it was corroborated by this British guy or something like that. Okay. Either you totally get it or you're so lost that you don't even know what you don't know. That's when you're really lost, when you don't even know what you don't know. Oh boy, for you. Okay. Finally, we get to the conclusion. Conclusion straight up, pretty copy and paste your thesis. Now, I assume Lindy will want you to kind of tweak it a little bit. By the way, it's my understanding that this paper is being graded in both classes. Right? It is graded in here. It has to be, and it's graded in there, and I don't know what criteria he's using. Okay. I'm grading this because it's part of the required U of M curriculum. He's grading it because this class and his class are partner classes. Okay. And then a summary of the argument, and then this time the context is the big picture, right? Throughout history, okay, something like that. Any questions? Either I've succeeded and you all totally get this, or you don't know what's going on. I'm going to go with the first option. Way to go. Okay, very good. I'm done then. So you have certain things you could take care of. Remember, the KIA that's due, what I will simply do is double your score. Whatever your score is, I will double it.
Is that an
Which
all
means
class?
that, yeah, the other class did it too. Winky struggled a bit, but got this. So whatever your score is, I will double it. And by the way, let's say that you take it and you don't even get half. You can take it again. Start where you left off and then answer some more questions. And then I will add those two scores together and double it. So let's say it's on 50 points. And you say, all right, I'm going to get 25 points. And so you answer the first 5 questions. That's each worth 5 points. And then you submit and you see that you didn't even get, let's say you got 15. So I'm going to double it. Well, now you got 30 out of 50. But you don't want 30 out of 50. You want more than that. Okay, go back into the KIA, do it again. Just start with the question you left off, answer some more. And then eventually get to half the points possible. I will double it. And then that will be your score. Does that make sense to you yet? Yeah, but you can't get extra credit, so there's a cap. There's a cap. Okay. Any other questions? So you got a KIA to work on, you've got your Lexington paper to work on, you've got your document to read, there's your world. As far as this class.
I have a question for you later. Can I say that if they're under oath?
Why the under oath?
The ones that are under oath, they're still on. So that can be like a paragraph is that just because it's under oath doesn't mean.
You can criticize that conclusion.
CJ, one of my kids being energetic, says, your mom,